I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's January 28th, and we have a lot to talk about. Previously on this podcast, we've talked about the TEAAMS study, which is a research study at the University of Illinois Chicago's UI Health in conjunction with the University of Alabama Birmingham School of Public Health. TEAAMS is an acronym for Targeted Exercise for African Americans with Multiple Sclerosis. And the study's research team is looking at the effects of a remotely delivered, racially tailored exercise training program among African Americans with MS who were living in low-income areas of the Southeastern United States, which is a part of the country that doesn't have many primary care or MS clinics that provide full exercise and rehabilitation services for people with MS. The research team hypothesizes that completing the TEAMS program will improve walking, decrease symptoms of fatigue, anxiety, depression, and pain, all while enhancing quality of life. And today we'll hear from Ashli, who lives with MS and by now has completed the TEAMS program, and Victoria, a behavioral coach who has worked with several study participants. But before we get to my conversation with Ashli and Victoria, there are a few other things that you should know about. Cabaletta Bio is preparing to launch a Phase 1, Phase 2 clinical trial for its CAR-T therapy called Rese-cel in people with relapsing and progressive forms of MS. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that announcement, so let's break it down. To begin with, you may already be familiar with a Phase 1 clinical trial and a Phase 2 clinical trial, but you may be wondering what a Phase 1, Phase 2 trial is all about. Well, a Phase 1, Phase 2 clinical trial is, as you might expect, a combination of the two. So, in addition to testing the safety, side effects, and best dose of a medication, a Phase 1, Phase 2 clinical trial will also test how effective the medication is. In CAR-T therapies, a type of immune cell called T cells are collected from an individual and re-engineered to seek and destroy a specific protein. In the case of Rese-cel, the T cells are engineered to target CD19, which is a protein that's found on the surface of B cells. Once a patient's T cells have been programmed for their mission, they're infused back into the patient's bloodstream so they can attack and destroy those B cells. The idea behind all this is that once all the B cells have been destroyed, the immune system will reset, much like it does in hematopoietic stem cell therapy or HSCT. In other words, the immune system resets and no longer mistakenly attacks the central nervous system, as occurs in multiple sclerosis. Rese-cel has been granted fast-track status by the FDA as a potential treatment for MS. That designation is designed to speed up the development of new therapies. So this Phase 1, Phase 2 study will recruit adults between the ages of 18 and 60 with either relapsing or progressive forms of MS. To qualify to participate, people with relapsing MS must have experienced at least one relapse in the previous 2 years and been on a high-efficacy disease-modifying therapy for at least 6 months. Participants with progressive MS must show objective evidence of worsening disability during the previous year and have been on one of the standard therapies for progressive MS for at least 6 months. An important note here: participants cannot have been on any B-cell depleting therapies for about 20 weeks prior to entering this study. This would include anti-CD20 therapies like Briumvi, Kesimpta, and Ocrevus. At the beginning of this trial, participants will be preconditioned by chemotherapy to destroy their existing immune cells and make room for those re-engineered T cells that will be introduced. Then the study participants will be given a one-time infusion of Rese-cel. Cabaletta has already launched Phase 1, Phase 2 trials to test rese-cel as a potential treatment for other autoimmune conditions where B cells play a major role, including myasthenia gravis, lupus, and systemic sclerosis. No date has been given for the start of their MS study, but we'll be sure to update you when recruitment gets underway. And just in case you were wondering, the company's name, Cabaletta, is a term that refers to a rapid, repetitive, and technically challenging section of an operatic aria. The company chose the name to signify its commitment to achieving rapid and repetitive product development to address a broad range of autoimmune conditions. We'll stay tuned for further developments. As I mentioned a moment ago, Briumvi is an anti-CD20 B-cell depleting disease-modifying therapy. It's administered intravenously, and it's considered to be the cheapest of the brand-name DMTs for MS, with an annual price tag of $59,000. Last year, sales of Briumvi topped $300 million, and TG Therapeutics, the maker of Briumvi, is projecting sales this year will exceed $500 million. One of the ways TG Therapeutics hopes to achieve that 67% increase in sales is by making Briumvi more user-friendly. This year, they plan to start testing new dosing regimens designed to reduce the time it takes for those infusions. And they also hope to launch clinical trials for a new formulation of Briumvi that can be administered subcutaneously by patients themselves, ending the necessity of going to an infusion center to receive the medication. TG Therapeutics also has plans to begin testing Briumvi as a therapy for other autoimmune diseases. The company also plans to launch a Phase 1 clinical trial for Azer-cel, another CAR-T therapy designed to target the CD19 protein that lives on the surface of B cells in our immune system. A moment ago, when I told you about Cabaletta Bio's CAR-T therapy, I said that CAR-T therapies use a patient's own T cells, but TG Therapeutics' Azer-cel doesn't. Instead, T cells are collected from other donors, providing a more consistent supply of this off-the-shelf therapy, making Azer-cel more accessible. We'll keep you posted as this Phase 1 clinical trial gets underway, and we'll be sure to update you as TG Therapeutics begins clinical trials for that more convenient, user-friendly formulation of Briumvi. Continuum Therapeutics has announced that enrollment has been completed for the Phase 2 clinical trial for PIPE 307, an oral remyelination therapy. In this clinical trial, 168 participants with relapsing remitting MS will be divided into two groups. For about 6.5 months, one group will receive 2 daily doses of PIPE 307, and the other group will receive a placebo. Now, in the mouse model of MS, PIPE 307 was shown to increase myelin repair and reduce physical disability. And the Phase 1 trial showed that it was safe and well tolerated at a number of different doses. This Phase 2 clinical trial will test the safety of PIPE 307 while tracking changes in visual acuity, which would indicate better myelination in the nerve that sends messages from the eyes to the brain. Changes in walking, dexterity, cognition, and biomarkers for MS will also be assessed. We'll keep you updated as news about this trial becomes available. Ballroom dancing. I'll be the first to admit that the idea of speaking those words on this podcast had never occurred to me. Until now. Because now there's evidence showing that ballroom dancing can be beneficial for people with MS. A small study involved 13 people with MS who participated in ballroom dance lessons over a period of 10 weeks, and then participated in a series of 5 one-hour focus group sessions. Of the 13 participants, 10 were women and 3 were men. The average age in the group was 45. 12 participants were living with relapsing remitting MS, and 1 was living with secondary progressive MS. 10 of the participants didn't require any walking aid, and 3 used a cane. The results of the study showed that ballroom dancing was well tolerated, and the individual participants with MS perceived it as beneficial because it produced positive physical and psychological changes. They found that the dance lessons provided an emotionally and physically supportive environment, improved their confidence, and facilitated physical activity. Physical benefits reported by the participants included improved strength, endurance, coordination, and balance. And beyond just physical benefits, the participants also reported reduced fatigue, reduced anxiety, diminished depression, and better memory. The study participants also said that participating in this program increased their confidence in their physical ability and increased their level of self-satisfaction and pride. And perhaps most important, the participants reported that the dance lessons were fun. Finding the right fit when it comes to physical exercise is important. Otherwise, it's difficult to stay engaged. And it seems that ballroom dancing has been shown to provide a fun way for some people with MS to participate in physical activity, and it's an activity that delivers benefits that go beyond just physical benefits. So you just may want to consider dusting off those dancing shoes and taking yourself for a spin on the dance floor. Now, if you'd like to review the details of this study, you'll find a link in today's show notes. Fatigue affects about 80% of everyone living with MS. And unfortunately, fatigue can be one of the most debilitating MS symptoms because it gets in the way of fully engaging with life. It can stop you from working, from participating in social events. It can keep you from fully engaging with your friends and loved ones. And there aren't any treatments that have been shown to be effective in mitigating MS-related fatigue. But that could be changing. A clinical trial of Elevita, a self-guided online German fatigue intervention that's based on cognitive behavioral therapy, showed significant benefit in improving fatigue among people with MS. So a research group tested an English version of Elevita for people with MS in Australia. This small study involved 15 participants who self-reported experiencing at least mild fatigue, at least some mobility, and mild or no cognitive impairment. 10 of the participants were women and 5 were men. 9 participants had relapsing remitting MS, and 6 had progressive MS. The study participants completed a 9-week English Elevita program, and their fatigue level was measured at the beginning of the study, at the end of the study, and then 2 months after the study had ended. Of the 15 study participants, 13 rated the acceptability of the program to be good or very good. 10 of the participants found the program to be helpful, and the research team measured significant improvement in fatigue from the beginning of the study to the end of the study, and this improvement was maintained 2 months after the program had ended. Accelerated Cure Project for MS has partnered with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs to conduct a large clinical trial for Elevita involving 2,000 people with MS in the United States. The trial is called CAFE-MS, and they're currently recruiting participants. To be eligible, you must live in the United States or its territories. You must be at least 22 years old. Your MS diagnosis must be confirmed by a neurologist. You must be experiencing MS-related fatigue. You must be fluent in English. You must be willing to independently use an online program for 24 weeks and complete follow-up surveys. You must have internet access and email on a smartphone, computer, or a tablet. You should not have had an MS relapse that required steroids in the previous 4 weeks, and you must not have started treatment with a new MS medicine in the previous 4 weeks. If you're interested in participating in this trial, you'll find a link to join the trial in today's show notes, and we'll keep you updated as additional news about CAFE-MS becomes available. Lately, you may have noticed that I'm mentioning specific opportunities for you to participate in MS research. As I've said before, research is the engine that drives progress. And progress in developing better treatments and cures for MS can't happen fast enough. But it can only happen when people with MS choose to participate in research. So I hope you'll consider becoming a participant in one of the studies that we discuss on this podcast or one that you may hear about from your neurologist. Joining me today to talk about their experiences participating in MS research are Ashli and Victoria. Ashli lives with MS and was a participant in the TEAAMS study. Victoria is a behavioral coach who has worked with Ashli and other TEAMS study participants. In a moment, we'll get an inside look at participating in the TEAMS study when we meet Ashli and Victoria. Previously on this podcast, we've talked about the TEAMS study, which is a research study at the University of Illinois Chicago's UI Health in conjunction with the University of Alabama Birmingham School of Public Health. TEAMS is an acronym for Targeted Exercise for African Americans with Multiple Sclerosis, and the study's research team is looking at the effects of a remotely delivered, racially tailored exercise training program among African Americans with MS who are living in low-income areas of the Southeastern United States, which is a part of the country that doesn't have many primary care or MS clinics that provide full exercise and rehabilitation services for people living with MS. The study consists of 2 different 16-week exercise programs that are completed 3 days each week at home. One exercise program consists of both aerobic and resistance training exercises, while the other program focuses on stretching and flexibility. Study participants are randomly assigned to one of the 2 programs, and all of the materials to complete each program, like yoga mats, resistance bands, and training manuals, are all provided. And every study participant receives a $90 gift card in compensation for completing the program. The study's research team hypothesizes that completing the TEAMS program will improve walking, decrease symptoms of fatigue, anxiety, depression, and pain, while enhancing quality of life. Today we're talking with Ashli, who's a participant in the TEAMS study, and we'll also hear from Victoria, a behavioral coach who has worked with the study participants and who's here to share some preliminary study results with us. Ashli, Victoria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, Ashli, maybe you can get us started by telling me when you were diagnosed with MS.
Thank you for asking. I was diagnosed with MS in August of 2007.
And are you currently on a disease-modifying therapy?
Yes, I am. I'm on Briumvi.
So, how did you initially find out about the study, and what motivated you to participate?
Well, I found out about the study in October of 2023. I had just changed my neurologist, and my new neurologist, she suggested that I apply to be an applicant in the study. And so I tried, and I didn't hear anything back. But I said, something in my heart is telling me I'm supposed to be a part of the study, so I'm not going to give up. So a few months passed, and I tried again in the new year. And I hung up the phone. I was like, well, let me call back in just a moment. I'm going to get some water. And then when I came back in my room, my phone was ringing, and someone from the study was calling me, named Denise Gomez, who was wonderful, by the way.
And tell me a little bit about your experience as a participant.
I had to qualify for the study. And once I qualified, they have done everything they said they were going to do. They sent me this bag of strength training, like resistance bands. And, it's been very helpful. It's been very restorative. It feels like MS can take things from you, but the study feels like it restores the things that have been taken from you. And so I'm really grateful that I was able, to be a part of the study, because more people need to know about stuff like this, and more people this is a representation of hope as far as I'm concerned. MS says you can't, but when people believe in you, say, hey, you know what? You can, maybe just at a different pace or a slower pace. That's refreshing to hear.
So I know the program had two different arms. One was aerobic and resistance training, and the other was stretching and flexibility. Which was your program?
My program is the aerobic and resistance.
Are you currently participating in the study, or have you completed your 16 weeks?
Yes, I'm actually in the 13th week of the first leg of the study.
How long is each of your exercise sessions?
Well, it did not start off this long. I will concede that. But I'm currently at 30 minutes for aerobic exercise and about 40 minutes of resistance band training.
Okay. And what kinds of exercises are you doing?
For aerobic activity, I'm walking at a brisk pace. And when you stick with it, I had no idea I could walk 1,000 steps in 10 minutes. I had no idea. I was walking that much at one point in a day. Mind you, I used to be an athlete. I'm a former athlete. I played basketball, soccer, I ran cross country and softball. So this has been very humbling having an ailment like MS because it limited my mobility. One of my initial signs that something was going on was there was a problem with my gait. And I also had optic neuritis, but the main thing that you can't ignore either. But when you have a problem walking, it's like you're off balance and you didn't know if you could, you're just taught to err on the side or encouraged to err on the side of caution. And so that means that I'm not obviously running any marathons anytime soon or sprinting to the store or anything. So, you're just encouraged, hey, stay here. You won't get hurt. You won't be hospitalized. No one ever told me that, but that's the culture of having an ailment like MS. Err on the side of caution, you won't end up in ICU. And so with this study, I found out I was not only able to do 1,000 steps within 10 minutes, I'm actually able to exceed that. My first goal was I was doing 1,100 steps in 10 minutes. Now I'm over 1,267 steps in 10 minutes. And the progression, not of the MS, but of my ability and my capabilities has continued with the study.
I was going to ask you if there were any positive outcomes from your participation in the study, but I think you've done quite a good job of indicating there certainly have been some positive outcomes.
Absolutely. It has helped restore my physical confidence, my physical capabilities and my confidence in those capabilities. And it has also restored my emotional, because it's hard when you want to do something and you don't want to put yourself in any kind of bad situation. Like I want to walk, but I can't obviously walk outside during the summer. But what I can do is walk in an air conditioned environment, such as the grocery store or my house, or I can go to the mall first thing in the morning. I mean, I have options that I just didn't realize, not all hope was lost. And the study helped me see that very clearly.
Were there any negative aspects to your participation in this study?
No, not any that I can think of. For me, the good has always outweighed the bad, even in my darkest moment with MS, but especially in the study because it's encouraging me to live by faith and not by sight. And it seems a certain way. I've been on at least 7 disease modifying therapies, and they were not successful. And I was on one for way too long. And this study helped me, recover some of the things that were seemingly lost. And I'm just really grateful. My coach, Victoria, is phenomenal. She has been my personal cheerleader the whole way. And she said, you know what? You think you can and you can. And, don't stop trying. An amazing job. During the study, I experienced some swelling in my ankles. And I didn't consider that a negative side effect because that's from, I've never had high blood pressure. So it's from overexertion of the area. And, my ankle dorsiflexors just aren't as strong as they used to be because they weren't in use like they used to be. However, thank God for muscle memorization because now I'm able to do that plus some. And so just elevating my feet, icing them, nothing to complain about. I found that I could benefit from lymphatic massages, and that would decrease the swelling in my ankles. And so it's not a negative result because it wasn't the final thing. It was just something I went through to get to the next level.
Since you just mentioned your personal cheerleader, I feel like it's a perfect time to bring Victoria into the conversation. Victoria, beyond simply being Ashli's personal cheerleader, can you explain your role in the team study a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ashli. That's so sweet of you. And I do want to say thank you to the previous ones who were also on because they had mentioned that too, our own Chiquita. They were so sweet. My main roles as a behavioral coach in this study is to explain the 16-week program, the materials that were provided. So essentially help the participants understand what this program and the outcomes are looking for at the end of 16 weeks. I'm also here to be a resource. Our whole lab focuses on physical activity and exercise. So even though this is one aspect, I can talk a lot about other things that our lab does. So things, physical activity, in addition to the exercises that are prescribed. And then finally, my role is to be a person to answer any questions. So a direct link into this. So resources to give any information needed, but to also answer questions that are unique to the experiences they're having in the program itself.
At the Consortium of Multiple Sclerosis Centers annual meeting, you shared some preliminary results from the study. I'm hoping you can share those preliminary results with us as well. So tell me, what have you learned so far?
Absolutely. So you mentioned that we have two arms of the study, the exercise intervention that focuses on the aerobic and resistance, and the second arm is the flexibility and range of motion. For the individuals that completed all 16 weeks, we had about 32. We looked at their walking dysfunction and their health-related quality of life. And to look at walking dysfunction, we used the 12-item multiple sclerosis walking scale, or the MSWS-12. It's a self-reported, patient-reported outcome measure that's used in other clinical settings to look at walking, any difficulties with it. So that was our primary one we looked at. Our secondary was the health-related. This was gauged by the MS, the Multiple Sclerosis Impact 29 scale. This is looking at both physical and psychological components of health-related quality of life. So what we saw was so interesting between the two groups. The MSWS scores were significantly higher in the intervention group, those who did the aerobic and the resistance training compared to the flexibility group. This means that the intervention experienced a higher improved score of their walking. The control also experienced an improvement, but not to the degree of the intervention. And to give you some numbers on that, the average score for the intervention group was 52.2 post-intervention. At the beginning, it was 39.6. That's a 12.6 improvement in their score of how they gauged their walking dysfunction. When we look at that analytically, the statistics show it's highly significant. If anything, it is very much a huge effect size there. That means it has a large effect. The treatment group had a large effect. When we look at the minimal clinical difference, the minimal clinically important difference, the MCID, this is just measuring the smallest change needed in a treatment outcome that an individual experiences. This would be considered important to indicate a change in their treatment. The MCID for this was 12.6, that number difference. So that was huge when we saw that this effect happen. So that was the primary outcome there, just looking at the walking dysfunction between the two groups. That secondary outcome that we looked at was the health-related quality of life. So look, there are two components, the physical and the psychological. Looking at the physical, we saw that the intervention had another significant improvement. It was an 11-point increase, so the effect size was huge there. Their post-intervention score on that scale was 40 and their baseline was 29. So huge improvement there. And then finally, for the psychological component, there were no differences between groups. So the main change was physical there.
Very impressive. I'm curious, are you still recruiting participants for this study?
Yes, we are. We are moving into waves 10, waves 11 and 12, I believe, at a rate of 6 to 8 participants. And we are still getting those who are interested in jumping on. So I'm also very curious to see how the results will change once we gather all of the data.
Ashli, someone listening to our conversation might be thinking about participating in this study or even another research study. What advice about participating in research would you share with them?
The first thing that comes to mind is don't be discouraged. This is something that it's going to try you like anything else, but the benefits outweigh the cost. So it is really, really necessary, not just sufficient, for you to believe in yourself and be patient with the process and, more importantly, with your body. Some days you don't feel like you can do it. But on those days, those are the days that you will have your most improvement if you were to simply stick with the program and the format and speak up, reach out, let people know how you're feeling. Like when my ankle was swollen, I went from 1 swollen ankle to 2. I didn't stop working out. I just asked Victoria if I could use a stationary bike instead of doing my walks. And she was like, "Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking." So it was never a negative where I had to completely stop. I'm determined to keep going. And with that determination, people will help you if you're really willing to help yourself, I believe.
Victoria, where can people find more information about participating in the TEAAMS study?
Yes, on our website, the ENRL, the Exercise Neuroscience Research Lab, our outreach coordinator, Whitney, an email to her, and our project coordinator, Denise, an email to her as well. And both of their informations are on our website for the TEAAMS study.
And I'll be sure to include a link to that website in today's show notes. Victoria, Ashli, I want to thank you both for sharing your experiences and reminding our listeners that without their participation, research stops. And when research stops, we all stop making progress. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society, and you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/387. You'll find that link in today's show notes so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or a text. And if you have a minute, I hope you'll visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the best way for us to stay connected. The app will automatically download the latest episode of Real Talk MS. You'll be able to access any of our past episodes. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes. And it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. The app is free, so I hope you'll download it today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.